Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pilgrim Story Hour. Let's see who's going to join us today. Well, while people join us, I'll introduce myself. I'm Mony Dojeiji, and I'm going to be your host for this hour that we have together for pilgrims to share stories about their experiences on pilgrimage, whether it's on the Camino, whether on other pilgrimages. So many people have walked the route from London to Rome. There are those like me who also walked from Rome to Jerusalem, and so many pilgrims from around the world who have walked to so many different destinations, called by whatever it is that calls any individual to go on that quest, to go on that journey towards inner knowing, to go on that journey towards understanding who they are and understanding this world and this marvelous universe in which we live. And so this hour that we have together is merely an opportunity for all of us to sit and share stories in the tradition of storytellers of old. I believe that the greatest life lessons that we learn on those journeys are passed on through telling stories. And so I will begin by telling you one of my stories, especially related to a specific theme. And this is what I would like to do every week that we have these broadcasts, or that we have this time together, is to choose a theme and to tell a story around that theme. And the theme for today will be around a lesson that you learned around overcoming a specific fear. And so my story that I will begin with today is one that I experienced as I was embarking on my personal journey, walking from Rome to Jerusalem. Now, I should mention that I had walked the Camino only a few months earlier. This was back in 2001, and it was at a time when the Camino just wasn't the popular thing that it has become today. But I walked the Camino, and I was feeling fairly confident in my ability to walk alone. And it was something that I had learned and developed on the Camino. So I had come off the Camino around August of that year, feeling fairly confident in myself, feeling that I had overcome a lot of fears, especially the fear of a woman walking alone. And so the calling to walk from Rome to Jerusalem really felt like that. It really felt like, just go and you'll be okay, and you'll receive what you need as you are walking. And I began, and I think there's a helicopter that's floating overhead. When I arrived in Rome, I arrived actually fairly confident. I was in Rome in November of that same year. I finished in August. In November, I was ready to start. I had already just met Alberto, the pilgrim who would accompany me, but he wouldn't be joining me until I didn't know when. And so I was prepared to walk alone. And I began feeling rather confident. I arrived at Vatican City, which was my starting point, and I had started there because I had heard that Rome. That for those who don't know, and this is a story that I heard actually on the Camino, which I will tell here. I had heard that there are three paths of initiation or spiritual awakening for those who are on the path, that each individual should walk if they want to get a deeper knowing of who they are. And the first walk, or the first route, is actually Camino de Santiago. And that particular path is called the Way of the Sword. And it is the place where you battle your fears and you discover your strength. So this is one of the paths. There's another path that leads to Rome, and that path is called the Way of Love. And it is the place where you learn about the meaning of love, and not just simply love between humans and relationship love, but love in the grandest sense, divine love, no matter how you choose to define divine. And finally, there's a route that leads to Jerusalem. And that path is called the Way of the Soul. And the Way of the Soul is the place where you connect with your highest self and connect with your highest purpose and the reason that you are here and what it is that you are here to offer in service, in love to the world. And when I heard about Jerusalem, for me, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to walk this path to Jerusalem to connect with my soul. And I felt fairly confident in my ability to do it. And I thought, as I said, I had conquered my fears. There's nothing else that I need to worry about. And so I arrived in Rome and Vatican City. And I thought, okay, this is just like walking along the side of the road on the Camino. So I'm just going to start walking. And so I began walking, but my backpack was actually much heavier than I had expected. And as I began to walk, I realized very quickly as I left the city that I was walking on highways, like pretty fast roads. There weren't really very many similar roads like that on the Camino. So I was on roads that where cars were moving very quickly in and out. And there really wasn't very much sidewalk for me to walk on. So I was walking kind of close to the edge, almost in the ditch, carrying a very heavy backpack that weighed, I would say, about 16 or 17 kilos. That's like over about, I don't know, maybe 25 to 30 pounds, because I was carrying winter gear. I was walking in November, and so I thought I was going to need heavier winter gear. And cars started honking at me, and whereas on the Camino, that would have been a good thing, because they would have been kind of saying, you know, buen Camino, and on the road, they were kind of motioning for me to kind of get off the road. Like, what are you doing, you crazy person, walking on the side of the road? And so I was starting to feel a little bit nervous about what I was doing. And the nervousness of walking on the side of the road was one, but then the other fear started to come out, which is around, which emerged when I started to see cars with men driving past, slowing down, taking a look, a couple of them looking for quite a long time. Some of them actually slowed down and asked me if they could offer me a ride, if I needed a lift. And that's when I started to relive the fear, the initial fear that I had on the Camino, which is, you know, I'm walking alone. But unlike the Camino, I was on the open road. There is really no infrastructure to support the pilgrim on this kind of a path to Jerusalem. There's actually no path. There is nowhere for you to sleep. There are no albergues. There's nothing to really support you. I was literally just a woman with a backpack walking on the open road. And nobody really knew that I was a pilgrim. Like, nothing identified me as a pilgrim. I was just, to them, to outside eyes, I was merely a backpacker. And so I started to feel nervous, and I thought, oh, maybe this really wasn't such a smart idea. And I kept on walking, and my destination was just to get to outside of Rome, just to the outside of the city limits, where the map that I had bought said that there were hotels. There was one hotel, and I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to get to the outside of the city. I'm just going to sleep in the hotel, and that'll be it. I'll feel safe, and I'll reevaluate my decision to continue going the next day. And as soon as I was arriving kind of near the hotel, I saw a sign for a campsite. And I paused for a moment, and I stopped, and I looked, and I thought, maybe I need to confront this deep fear that I have of a woman walking alone. You know, anything can happen. You know, the deepest fear of every woman. You get stopped, you get picked up, you get killed, left on the side of the road. I mean, nobody knew where I was walking exactly. Nobody had any idea. Nobody was waiting for me, as pilgrims do, to kind of check on me to see if I was okay. And so when I saw the campsite, I thought, I had actually a tent with me. I had basic camping gear in the beginning because I didn't know how I was going to sleep and where I was going to sleep. And so I decided that I would go and camp out to actually confront that fear, because experience had taught me before that if I don't confront that fear, if I don't face it head on, then there's a good chance it's just going to fester, and it's just going to manifest and show itself in other ways. And so rather than go to the comforts of the hotel, which was beckoning on this side, I decided to go on that side, on the other side, and to actually see what would happen if I camped out and to face that fear directly. So I arrive in the campsite, kind of, wobbling in, hobbling in with my big backpack. And I looked like a turtle. And many people described me as a turtle in those early days of walking because my backpack was so heavy. And I arrived and I found the office, and I couldn't speak Italian. And I just assumed for some reason everybody could speak English. And I walked in, and the men, there was one gentleman there, and he looked at me kind of surprised. And I tried explaining in English that I was looking to camp, and he spoke to me in some kind of Italian that I didn't understand. And so I was speaking more slowly, explaining, I just want to camp in your site. How much does it cost? He didn't hear anything. He just waved me away. I said, can I sleep there? I just did this, sleep there. And he said, yeah, okay. And he just shooed me away like I was some kind of, distraction or a fly that he didn't want to deal with. And so that's what I said, okay, I'm just going to go and find myself a spot in this area and camp out for the night. And so I set up and it was starting to get dark. It wasn't fully dark yet. It was around, 6 o'clock. It was starting to get dark, but I managed to set up my tent, and I set it up no problem. I saw that there were washrooms not too far away. I said, okay, so I can go there if I needed them. And so I set up my tent, and I went to sleep. I think it was probably at around 9 o'clock at night. It was still very early. I wasn't tired, but I was still very kind of nervous. And I thought, no, I'm not going to allow this fear to overcome me. And so I began to just breathe deeply a lot. I tried to meditate lying in my sleeping bag. I knew I was not going to get out of that sleeping bag once I got in, because I wasn't going to move. I was going to stay there unless my life was in danger, obviously, but I was working on my life not being in danger. So I was looking to face down that fear and say, it's okay. And I think it showed me, and I remembered similar experiences on the beginning of the Camino, because what it was showing to me is that on the beginning of every great adventure, on the beginning of every great journey, the fears come up. The fears show up to say, are you going to keep going, or are you going to allow that fear to stop you? And because it had happened to me on the Camino and other circumstances, I thought, no, this is just coming to me to ask me, are you ready to, if not if not make peace with your fear and love your fear, at least acknowledge that it's there and say, I see you, but I'm walking anyways. And so I managed to fall asleep that night. I heard a soccer game happening not too far from where I was. Well, it felt like it was right next to me, although I'm sure that it was a lot further away. And I woke up very early the next morning, probably around 6 o'clock. And I woke up and I was packing away my tent. And as I was packing away, I thought, okay, everything is ready. And I saw a lot of workers, like a lot of people walking around, workers, and there were no other campers. I was the only person in that campsite. And I'm thinking, oh, well, that's kind of weird. So I went to the washroom to kind of wash up. And I walked in and I saw the toilets being pulled out. There were men in there with toilets in their hands. And I looked at them. And they looked at me. We're both equally surprised. And I said, and I tried to ask in English. I said, what are you doing? And they just did this, the sign, this. And it's closed. So it was closing. It's like, oh, so I guess I gotta hold it. Can't go into the washrooms here. And with the sinks, it was the same thing. They were starting to take out some of the, the sinks. And it's like, okay, well then, I guess I'm just going to make my way and maybe find a bar where I can wash up and go to the washroom. And I put my backpack on. They're all looking at me in a very strange way, and I can't explain myself, and we can't communicate. And so I start to walk out of the campsite, and as I'm walking out, I see that they are boarding up the entrance to this campsite. So when I saw these workers there boarding everything up, and I literally was walking out the gate as they were boarding everything around it, I realized beyond a shadow of a doubt that I had done the right thing. I had done the right thing in facing my fear and going to that campsite, and in acknowledging that, yeah, I have fear there, but I am going to look at it. I'm going to try and calm that fear down as much as possible. And with courage and with determination, I'm just going to keep taking one step at a time to get to my destination. In a way, it also made me appreciate that I wasn't walking alone. Although I had many examples of that on the Camino, this to me augured a journey ahead that was going to be filled with magic and that was going to be filled with miracles. If on my first day of facing my fear and walking with confidence, I could have an experience like this, I just knew that everything ahead of me was going to unfold well, and that all that I needed, I would receive on this journey if I was simply able to relax and just take one step at a time. So that was the one of the biggest fears I probably had to face when I started walking from Rome to Jerusalem. Now I'm going to open it up for others to share their stories with me as well. And I see here that we have 5 viewers. I'm going to now see how we are going to get you all here live. If you'll give me a moment or so, let me see how I can. Here we are. Are you there? Are you all connected to me? Nope, I don't see anyone here. Okay, let me see if I can bring you on. Is anybody on here? Let's see. I'm going to try and add people to this. I'm going to pause for a moment and I'll be right back.